Danielle Marshall, voting. Teresa King, voting. Ryan Hinkle, Jamie Whitehead, not here. Kathy Enke, voting. Wayne Holt, not absent. Okay, Robin Sue,
I'm here.
you're voting.
Voting.
Marie Yarborough,
Here voting.
Lily, you're voting. Patrick, Gabe,
Here.
Kirsten.
Voting.
John Bench,
Voting.
Alan absent, John Eisenhower,
Voting.
Bo Lysy is absent, Jim Sawyer,
Voting.
I am voting Jessica Bass, absent, Carrie Hayes,
Voting.
Roger St. Amand,
Here, voting.
Eliza Bishop,
Here, not voting.
Jennifer Vanilla. Okay, Gary Burr.
Here, voting.
Voting. Darcy Throckmorton is absent, Aaron Brown.
Here, voting.
Voting. Okay. Tammy Tripler.
Here voting.
Okay, and I don't think anyone else is coming. You know, the voucher went around, at the high school voucher, I know just went around, even though we're not having a meeting, I'll plug that voucher, but any vouchers, just check your emails for vouchers and please sign them. Is there any public comment? Okay, would you like to come up here? Am I doing this the right one? Yes, yeah.
First, I want to tell you about a story about a school that let Outmain come into their high school and talk to their students. It was fantastic until somebody who promised to go into each classroom after the class and tell them that there was no harassment, that there would not be any tolerated, fell through. Outmain went into that school and made things worse because it was not clear that harassment would not be tolerated. Things in that school people have been outed. Harassment's worse than ever. And students are so terrified to go to the staff and tell them that this harassment's going on because of this high school's consistent lack of response to bullying and harassment. This is outrageous. So this is the Trevor Project did a national survey on LGBTQ youth and mental health in 2021. 42%, that's almost half of our LGBTQ students have considered suicide in the last year. Almost half of our students that are LGBTQ queer community have contemplated suicide. 12% are white youth have attempted suicide. 30% are Native Indigenous youth, 21% Black youth, 20% multiracial, 18% Latin, 12% Asian Pacific. Sorry, I have severe social anxiety. 75% of LGBTQ youth reported that they experienced discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity at least once in their lifetime at school. Half of all LGBTQ youth of color reported discrimination based on their race, ethnicity in the past, including 67% of Black LGBTQ youth and 60% of Asian Pacific. I don't know what the ratio is in our district, but that's outrageous. 13% of LGBTQ youth reported being subjected to conversion therapy. Home is not a safe place for some of these people, these students who are our future. And we are severely lacking in a safe place for them to be themselves at school. The school district needs to allow Outmain to come in, and there has to be a disciplinary tree. This looking the other way has got to stop. So my question for everyone is, why is a Title IX coordinator employed by the school and taught by the school's lawyers? That can't happen. The Title IX coordinator has to be a non-biased person. Has to be. Because I will tell you from experience, you get blown away, blown off, told there's nothing we can do until you write in or formal investigation. Update harassment policy to include a disciplinary trait. This talking to our students because they attacked somebody else, whether verbally or physically, is not okay. Talking to does nothing. I will tell you, I am not stupid enough to think that I can change anybody's thinking or how they feel. But I'm smart enough to know that if you inconvenience these parents, they're going to teach their kids when they can and can't open their mouths. Formal investigations have to be automatic. When a staff member hears of some sort of harassment or bullying, if the student wishes to remain anonymous, that staff member has got to have some sort of reporting so that these kinds of things have to be kept track of. If the student wishes to remain anonymous, so be it, but that staff member has got to report it in some situation, even if they just witness it. They have to report it so that this can be documented. So you guys can keep track of what's going on in your school so that we can put a stop to this. The forms, oh my God, it would not take more than half a day to put formal investigation forms in every classroom in the school, every guidance counselor office. But instead, there's a little itty bitty paragraph in the student handbook that says if you wish to have a formal investigation done, you have to write into the school and it has to be done in writing. The entire district needs access to Outmate or Rainbow Alliance or whichever program. There's 5 different ones that have programs to come into the school and teach a student body. And don't let it be about the queer community. Let it be about harassment so that you cannot have students opt out of it. Having students opt out of a harassment policy is ridiculous. It can't happen. It shouldn't happen. And let the experts teach what the experts know how to teach. You wouldn't put an English teacher teaching a advanced algebra class. So let the experts come in and teach about proper terms, terminology, definitions, and what it's like to be harassed or, anything, how to be an ally. Yes, but definitely include there's consequences for breaking the no harassment policy. These things have got to be done because we are not protecting our students. Again, almost 50% of our LGBTQ students have considered attempting suicide. That's way too much. The school is legally responsible to provide a safe place for our students to be, and it's not. And until it is, I'm going to be at every policy board meeting and every one of these meetings asking why. Because this has got to change. Our kids are not safe. Our kids are hurting, and these kids are our future politicians. They're our future, plain and simple. And if we raise a huge mess of kids because we can't protect them, then that's our fault. And when we're old and need help and they're not there because they're just crazy messed up, that's on us. But even regardless of that, these are our children who we love and adore. You guys didn't become part of the school system because you hate kids. I doubt any of you hate kids. Let's protect them. Let's do what we can to make this a safe place, district-wide, for all of our students too. And if that means eliminating the students that are being bullies, so be it. You can't cater to the bullies because, you just can't. In-school suspensions, bring them back. expulsion, bring it back. The bullying and the harassment has to stop. But since Outmain has come to this high school, it has increased because nobody bothered to say harassment will not be tolerated. That's all it takes. Harassment won't be tolerated. And until somebody stands up and says that, this is going to continue to happen. And it's not just happening to one kid. Since Outmain came out, I've heard from 7 different kids that things have just gotten worse. Because there is no follow through and people are terrified of the staff and of them doing nothing. And I can't stand by and watch these children hurting and do nothing. And they are hurting. They are cutting. They are suicidal. And how are we going to stop that? How can we stop that? By listening to them. You guys want a new policy? Hand it to them. Tell them to make the new policy and then hand it to your lawyers for wording. But do something now. Don't wait until my lawyer gets a hold of you. Don't wait until their lawyer gets a hold of you. Do it now because our children are hurting. And in turn, that hurts us in so many ways.
Thank you.
Did she say her name and no, is she a parent or?
She's a parent. Do you want to say your name and your town just for the?
I'm Rand Phoenix and what am I supposed to say?
Your town.
That's it, and your town.
Your town.
Oh, I live in Hancock, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there more public comment? Okay, we have 3 sets of minutes to approve, which we could take as a slate. Is there a motion?
That would approve 3 sets of minutes.
Any discussion?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, that brings us to reports and updates. So I'll turn it over to Mike for the report.
Good evening, everybody. It's sunny outside. We thought we could do something like that. As of this morning, we have 1,390 total students in the district as a whole, 495 at the high school. That's 10 fewer district-wide from a month ago. This is a time of year where there's a lot of movement back and forth between schools. It's always a fluid process. So every week, every Monday when I look at those numbers, they sort of bounce around, but that's where we are. In terms of COVID-19, our numbers last week, there were 18 cases, or the week before, and last week there were 11. And then we'll see, watching very carefully, what our numbers look like as we go into this week. Just folks know, you probably saw it in my note that went out that we are now green. The lab and COA have gone to mask optional in their institutions, and I'm working with the nurses to still consider different mitigating factors in terms of sort of being able to monitor where we are and to be able to react appropriately if we see any changes that we may need to act. So I'm keeping a very close eye on that and having conversations with the nurses. There is a new SOP that came out. Didn't have a lot of changes in it. There's some language that I'm working on, so I will have that updated this week in the link that families see, particularly around the idea of those contacts and what the expectations are for that. And so I'll be sharing that information. In terms of collective bargaining. Bar Harbor has wrapped up and just finishing up on signatures, and we'll be talking later about the support staff. We're still in talks, and but it's positive and thoughtful. Over the past month, I've been to Mount Desert Elementary School. I was there today and last week and the week before. I've been to Trenton. We've had principals out for various reasons and staff supporting them. And so that has worked really well. I was in Trenton to sort of support them for part of the day. And the same with Mount Desert and working with their staff as their principal has been out for a longer period of time. Budget updates. Saturday out on Cranberry, they passed their school budget. Just so you all know, one thing that Cranberry does that's really helpful is they had breakfast there set up. So I don't know if you want to talk to your town managers. And it looks like they were having lunch for part of the way through, and then we got off the boat at 11:30 after we finished with the school portion. And so think about that. We are still, of course, our budget has passed. The high school budget goes to its annual budget meeting on the 6th. We have a public meeting in Bar Harbor to talk about their budget, particularly the CIP portion of their budget with town officials. There is a warrant committee meeting in Mount Desert tomorrow as well. Southwest Tremont, Trenton passed its school budget, and they're in talks with their budget committees and select board. And then, of course, Cranberry and then Frenchboro will be voting this week on their budget. One of the things that I was holding on to all month long because I was waiting for a meeting is later in February, I had sent out a note about supporting intellectual freedom and took some of the information that you all heard around intellectual freedom and the information that you shared on equity and a commitment that the board made. I shared that with the staff as a whole, and I got a really nice note from a couple of teachers, and a principal, Jandria, had sent a note that said it was perfectly timed with conversations that teachers have brought to her, and thought that it was very supportive for their staffs. And then Keith Eaton, the social studies teacher here, wrote, "As a concerned teacher in the humanities, I very much appreciate this. In fact, I doubt you would ever know just how much this means to us. Not everything in history and literature is pretty, and yet it is instructive. Please share my appreciation the next time you discuss this with the board. Seriously." So I made sure that I made a copy of that to share with you. And I think in the light of the social responsibility day that's coming up at the high school, I think that's sort of apropos that I'm reading that this week as we're looking forward to that event. In terms of our public comment, know that I have been meeting, I am meeting with the young lady, the student who stood up, Chloe Bolt. She is in doing parts of the play, so she's very busy and pulled out her phone. I've never thought, a high school student, I don't think I ever had a planner. And if the administrator asked me to set a meeting, that I would be looking through it, but she was looking through it to try to figure a time in the next 2 weeks as play work settles down. She and I are going to meet to discuss, some of the things that she shared with the board, because it is my feeling that that student perspective is really important. She, truly appreciated that I reached out to her last week to do that. Again, that social responsibility day is coming up on the 22nd here, and the movie is the 21st. I spent some time over the weekend. I'm going to look forward to watching the movie, but I always think it's interesting to be able to look at what other people are saying about film, especially in this area. And I scrolled through everything from Roger Ebert to the Wall Street Journal that talked about this film. And in all of those places, it was highly regarded in terms of the import that it has and an understanding of our times in our country. So, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And it'll be interesting how it plays out in students' responses to that film. So that is good. On the 31st. The administrative team is doing a retreat. Part of that time we'll be doing some touchstones training, which is that experience within social studies on communication that we're working with our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. Then I'm going to be working on a key component of our professional evaluation and growth cycle on the 10 elements. That is kind of drawn from some of the work that we're doing with our coaching, and revise those as we take a look at that, because that's a very important part of our professional growth. So we're starting to make sure that all of the things that we're doing coincide. And then we're going to spend some time with the art of coaching teams as that work continues. I know that when I was in schools last week, that people who are either on their way to the training or had come back were very excited about what they were learning and how they'd be able to put that in practice. So I am truly appreciative of the work that Julie and Rhonda have been doing. That work seems to be making a difference. And a reminder as we get to the calendar, that calendar is part of that work as we look to pass that so we can begin planning for next year. And then finally, I wanted to share that we have some principal searches going on for Bar Harbor and Kennewick, and those ads are out, and teams have been put together, and that process is moving forward.
There are questions for Mike? Okay, so we will turn it over to Director of Teaching and Learning. It's like Rhonda is here.
Yeah.
Today.
So, hello, everybody. Echo what you said. It's so nice to have it still be light out and it's sunny. It's like a huge bonus.
It's not freezing in here.
And it's not freezing in here. So, hopefully everybody had a chance to read the March note. And I'd just like to send a shout out to all the librarians who did a wonderful job compiling information for us on the war in the Ukraine right now, so that teachers could respond appropriately with students, or answer questions that they may have. And the resources were in sections, so grade specific. So thank you, librarians. For March, Julie and I launched 4 different professional development opportunities. And one of them is building a more equitable advisory system. So we have 16 middle school and high school teachers who are part of that work. And it's really looking at, what does advisory look like now? And where do we want to go? And how do we get there? It's next steps. We have 26 teachers involved in high impact teaching strategies. So Mike alluded to the 10 elements, so that high impact strategies really connects with those 10 elements. We have 19 teachers doing mentor training. So we are really looking at beefing up our support of new people coming into the district to just help that transition, but also we know that if they're really supported in their work, then they'll be more apt to stay with us. And then we have 27 people reading and discussing this book on the science of reading. It's Language at the Speed of Sight, How We Read, Why So Many Can't, and What Can We Do, and What Can Be Done About It. And it's by Mark Seidenberg. You wanna take a look at that, but it's a very interesting read. And that's it for those 4 opportunities. And then Mike had also mentioned last Thursday we did Art of Coaching Teams. We had about 40 folks. Part of that, the learning area leaders at the high school, and then the new common study leaders at the K-8 level. And some of the work, Julie and I put out a little Google form after the training, and we said, what's one word that describes? And some of the words are insightful, reframing, helpful, engaging, useful, informative, feedback, overwhelmed but inspired, solid, worthwhile, invigorating, enlightening, excellent, thought-provoking, inspiring. The next steps on that, Julie and I are going to be meeting with the Common Study leaders one-on-one to plan for the May 20th early release day. That's going to be their first time meeting with their group. Jill is meeting with the learning area leaders at the high school and getting them ready to go. And we look forward to, implementing that next year if the calendar passes. So yeah, on the 20th, they'll be doing a needs assessment and kind of planning their work for next year. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, that brings us to report from school psychologist and district social worker.
This is not intimidating at all. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie Lowe. I'm one of the school psychologists that joined the district last year. First, we're just going to do a run through of kind of what schools we're at. And just because Dan and I are separated at our schools doesn't mean that we're not a team, because we truly are. We are always working together and bouncing ideas off of each other and really collaborating. So I just want to make that clear from the very start, even though we're at different schools. And I know we have a slideshow. That's why I'm standing here.
It's not fancy. It's not fancy.
No, it's not fancy at all. But I'll just keep talking as we're going. So I'm at the high school and a lot of times Tuesdays and Thursdays. I really enjoy having that flex time. It's a really good chance for me to meet with students one-on-one, and I'm not taking them out of their classes. And then I'm at Pematech on Mondays. This is the first year, we didn't do this last year, where it's sort of at school undesignated days, and that's really helped with kind of building connections within the schools. And then I'm at Tremont on Wednesdays, and then as needed Swans and Cranberry. And I also go to the community school. So Dan.
Right. Do you guys mind if I take this off? It's okay. I'm Dan Rinkwitz. Again, as Stephanie said, it's really nice to get another year under us.
Schools, and then I'm at Tremont on Wednesdays. And then at, was there a delay?
At the same time. I know we're from away, but we're still trying to build relationships with everyone. I think it's a key for our role, school psychologists. So I'm at Monday and Thursdays at Mount Desert this year. Wednesdays at Trenton, and Tuesdays and Fridays at Connors Emerson. And I do support Cranberry Isles as needed. It's been good to be able to actually say these things, because I've been bouncing around the first year during COVID. We really had to try to put some things together to support and help everyone. So a little bit about what we do. The next slide, please.
Please don't preface with, I know we're from away, like you set up like a situation where, we hired you. We
I apologize.
appreciate your work, and you're a part of our community. So I just don't want you
I
to
appreciate
feel
that.
that.
Yeah, I just feel
Like
like building
makes me really
relationships.
uncomfortable.
Okay, I don't mean that. I didn't mean that at all. I was thinking that as it's relationships building, it takes time
Right.
to do.
So
That's what I meant by that.
it's a weird way to offer you support in a way that I don't look at you from away. You're part of our school system that is doing a very important job. And so,
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you very much.
sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, not at all. Please comment, please. So, a big part of our job at times is doing psychological evaluations, as you guys may know, and they are sometimes very unique, depending on the cases. We get to know families, we get to know teachers, we get to know the way the schools kind of function here. We do cognitive testing, we review files, academic testing is needed, and Stephanie has done more of that than I have. And I think, we're really just trying to hone in and find out if kids need support and what help they need. So that's usually fine referral question. The second piece, weekly director school psych meetings. We definitely attend them to stay on top of each other, to talk, work as a team. Melissa and Kathy do a great job trying to keep us all integrated and together. There's monthly crisis team meetings that we attend. That's a part of our role there. We're trying to kind of support the teams in each building and try to make sure that we're trying to really focus on improving what needs to be done. And school team meetings as needed. I don't know, a few times I talk to principals when I show up at my buildings just to try to touch base with them. And sometimes they ask us, I don't know if Stephanie for you, but they ask me to come in and like talk about a certain case, something that's kind of sticky and a little tricky. They want our expertise on that. So we kind of share that information. Risk screening and threat assessments. So that's a work in progress. We are definitely working to complete them. I know in the past we sought them out. So we're actually in the process of trying to make the systems work nice and smooth. It's taking some time. So we're actually trying to get some things together with that. And we offer building level support as needed. It's good being, like I said, instead of being in the buildings more, we're actually trying to make a difference in that way and let people see us more than just coming in doing a test and leaving. We want to actually be more permanent into the buildings. Attending professional development. Maine's really hard to stay certified in. I don't know if you know about that, but as a school psychologist, I'm actually taking a class for recertification in Maine. I think it's a big point. I think they're really having a hard time finding school psychologists that are staying. And the fun thing at the end, well, not at the end, but testing materials are always an issue. I don't know if you want to share with that, Stephanie, a little bit about what you
It's a
support that.
new aspect to our job that we have embraced. We're learning how to fill out purchase orders and getting all the tools that we need. We're fortunate we came from larger districts and somehow those magically appeared. And so learning how to take care of it ourselves has been a learning curve, but I think we've got it down now. But it's an important part of our job to make sure that we have the tools and resources that we need to and have them ready on hand when we need them.
Yeah, and the big thing founding an organization, I didn't realize we came on, we inherited 4 or 5 big filing cabinets. And every year we kind of make sure they're all in the right order and right place. It takes more time than I thought, but this is something that we kind of do to stay current.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
For risk screening and threats assessment, can you explain that? I mean, I have like a layperson's like guess about what that means, but can you
Yeah,
talk
do
about
you
that?
mind if I tackle that just because that's the first thing on the next slide, if
Yeah.
that's okay? Yeah, so that's something that we've been working on. So there are many layers to it. And so the way that I would look at it, there's where we've kind of taken apart the suicide versus threat, suicide screenings and versus a threat screening or a threat assessment. And so we are super close to finishing our suicide risk screening guidelines. It's a challenge because every situation is different. Every child is different. And the way that you handle it, depending on the time of day and what is said, varies. So in terms of creating guidelines, it's a challenge. And so we've been working closely with administration and nurses and teachers to develop these guidelines. And we're super close to getting that because we would like to have a district-wide policy that people can follow. And that will be a priority for us to have that training completed at the beginning of next school year to make sure that everybody knows what they're supposed to do when they hear a concerning phrase or what have you, if that makes sense. And then I'm skipping ahead to the threat assessment protocols, but as soon as we get the suicide risk screening protocols, sorry, I don't like that word, guidelines completed, we'll work on for the threat assessment. And that's more like, I'm going to kill you, or, or a serious threat that somebody makes online, or, students over here or what have you. What is the process in place to address that? One of the things that I think Dan was talking about was attending professional development. I was really lucky lately that I was able to attend the National Association of School Psychologists Conference in Boston. And I got some really cool tools and resources for threat assessments. And so I think that's going to make our job a lot easier, putting some guidelines in place, just so it's consistent across the district and people know what they need to be doing. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
It did. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. So again, we've been working on the risk screening guidelines and what that's going to look like. We're super close to pass that over to the A team for approval. We tweaked the special ed teachers who administer achievement tests had a template. And so we tweaked that just to make it consistent across the board. add some more information. And then we calibrated our psychoeducational evaluation reports just so it's a little bit more consistent between the schools. And so these are kind of the special projects that we've taken on versus the day-to-day that Dan was talking about. There are monthly common study teams within the special education department, and sometimes we're asked to attend those and present information, such as one of the things that came out last year was orthographic processing, and making sure that we're addressing those in evaluations, and so presenting information to the teams on what that is. Yeah, the trainings we've done, working with the special ed teachers who do have to administer the achievement test, working on making sure that they're up to date on what that looks like, and really guiding and being a resource for the new teachers who are learning to administer those assessments. But we've also, last year we did a collaboratory on the trauma-informed practices. That was great. And this year we have a book study going for the equity-centered trauma-informed practices book group. And so we're super close to being done with that and looking forward to steps forward. One of it, I'm looking forward to kind of making some recommendations about how, as a district, how we can become more trauma-informed within district policies and so forth, which I'm looking forward to it being a process of. Looking forward, one of the things that we would really like continue to be involved in is the RTI process. I'm pretty passionate about the way that looks. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with RTI, response to intervention, before you go through a special education referral, you have to implement interventions. This falls down from looking at specific learning disabilities, there being over identification of certain populations within that. So we really have to make sure that we're providing pertinent instruction and making sure that we're targeting interventions before we make the jump to special
Proactively
education.
tracking the kids, not just waiting to the end and evaluating, tracking them along the way.
Exactly. One of the things that if you want a recommendation from me, I know you didn't ask, but if you did, I would love to see a full-time designated behavior specialist in the district. I think that would be something amazing to have. One of the reasons we were hired is because of the increase in behavior difficulties throughout the district. And I think that having somebody who could be full-time, focusing on with teachers and providing guidance and suggestions for interventions and creating behavior plans and such, I think would be fabulous to have one person dedicated just to that. It's just something that I've seen in other places that I've worked, and I think that we could all really benefit from that. Lastly, I've already talked about the threat assessment protocols, but that's something that we are going to be tackling just as soon as we wrap up the suicide for screenings and guidelines. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Edie. We'll step away, but we'll hang tight if you guys have questions at the end. Sound good? All right.
Thank you.
Anita Dubois, also called Edie. I feel like I was got
No,
my
you're
back, so
fine.
we're
You're
right on
fine.
top of you. So SEL supports social and emotional language supports. We all have a piece in that as staff, and it includes guidance counselors, myself, a social worker, certainly classroom teachers, nurses, school psychologists, speech and language pathologists. So again, we all have a part in delivering that. Next slide. So I wanted to just quickly go over what is mental health, because it can mean something. It can mean different things to different people. For some folks, it means mental health. Oh, that means counseling. And for others, I like this broader definition, the upkeep of thriving mental and emotional functions. It's in line with development of the brain, certainly includes energy level, ability to think clearly. And a couple of things that really impact our mental health are sleep and nutrition. And I have been going over that since I came here in 2010, how very important those two very much impact our mental health. Again, having relationships with others, resilience are components, and being able to follow through with our daily living. Next slide. I love this quote about, it was February, right before everything shut down, I was in this huge conference, trauma supports for sensitive schools in Atlanta. And this was one of the quotes from that conference, and trauma sensitive schools. One of the biggest buffers for students during challenging times are caring relationships with adults. The healing happens within that relationship. One of the reasons I love working for AOS 91 is we very much value knowing your students, and that has a tremendous buffering impact on students when they go through traumatic events or situations in their lives. Next slide. How are we supporting our students? We are providing a safe, structured, nurturing environment, creating stability every day. I mean, our schedules are pretty much the same every day. School starts the same time every day. We have our classes. They know the routine. Myself, I continue to see students individually as well as the guidance counselors. Their roles, our roles overlap. They are a little different though. They are more in the classroom where I am more working with groups of students. I also work with families. I do some of the risk screens as well, although the guidance counselors are trained on how to do those. Opportunities for outdoor activities are awesome for mental health. We're talking about some guest speakers. We've had Colleges of Maine just come in. Bob Stewart, he's been a long time guest speaker to come in. He really gets students excited about attending colleges. These are in the works of next step, and I do have Out Maine that was already mentioned, and Kip Young. He's been a long time, very popular substance abuse counselor in our area. Those are some of the things that are going to be scheduled as well. Next slide. Oh, so some of the SEL programs that we use to different degrees in our schools are Mind Up, Goes In, Character Trees, Zones of Regulation. Zones of Regulation has been around for quite some time, and it is wonderful. The kids really get it. It's got different color-coded yellow, green, blue, red about the different zones that you're in, the feelings identification, name it to tame it. And we have some laminated bookmarks that students can use, and they really love that. Yes. And again, this helps them to respond reflectively rather than reactively. Next slide. The referral process is not very complicated, which I love. A parent, for myself to see me or another counselor, a parent can refer. They can get a hold of me or someone at the school, their teacher. That's often how it will come to me. A teacher will say, I talked with this parent and they would like you to see their child, or call it principal. Sometimes it happens that way, or through guidance. Sometimes a student comes right up to me. I work mainly at Connors Emerson, which is K-8, and I'm right on the 7th and 8th grade floor. So I have lots of students who just come up to me and say, can I see you? I can see a student once, or I can see them many times. Sometimes I will identify the need that this is probably better served outside of the school. Example of that would maybe be an eating disorder. And I would work with the family to identify the best provider. So again, there's multiple pathways for the students. And what is different about our school is that I see both special ed and regular ed students. It's not always that way. In other school districts, it's very separated. Yes, and school counselors generally see short-term and then refer out if needed. That way, that gives them the opportunity to see more students. Next slide. And supports for staff. They can have consult with myself or another qualified professional. We have the member assistance program. Anything, this is a huge one, this third one down, activities that foster connection and a sense of community. Michelle had this Surviving School of Staff Support Series over at Pematic. They're now doing this March Madness Monday Muffins. Takes a little while to say that. And I've been sending out, I know Tammy was sending out a Friday morning message at the high school and at Connors Emerson. And it was just started out as a little thing like, woohoo, it's Friday. And sometimes I ask a question like, does anyone remember the very first movie they saw in a movie theater? And we have a big age span between our staff now. And some of the responses that we get are just really quite funny. And you really date yourself when you say some of these movies. And I just thought it was a little thing, but I can't tell you how many staff write to me or come up to me and say, I love your Friday morning messages. They're so great. And it provides, again, a sense of connectivity and connection and some wellness activities that we've also been doing. And is that it? Am I done?
That's one.
Oh, okay. Any questions for myself or Dan or Stephanie?
So all great, but like what happens if a person in a staff in Fremont or Trenton or whatever needs support, that's you're primarily a Connors Emerson?
Yes, but I'm a district social worker, so I do get out, and this is pre-pandemic, I would get out to the schools at a more regular basis, I would say. So I do have the capacity to work with other schools, and I have been along with the pandemic, but it's usually more by phone. But I have been over to Pematic a couple times this year, and also Tremont and Trenton. So I still get out and about.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but other than psychological assessments, do you folks have a caseload? I'm not quite sure I understand.
In terms of like seeing
Seeing students, yeah.
seeing students like
Yeah.
he does, no, we do not.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just thinking through like the logistics of so the high schools, you know, I have someone in the high school and I have someone in the elementary school, so I kind of see a little bit how those play out differently in terms of potential students that may need assistance. If there's a student at the high school, for say, that doesn't self-report, you know, sees someone in the hallway, you know, how, for instance, like what is the equivalent of you at the high school? What does that look like? You know, we put so much on teachers and we put so much on everybody in the school. So I'm not saying everybody should be trained this way, but, you know, for instance, if there is there some sort of like formal or informal, like I teach math and I notice that, you know, student A seems to be struggling potentially. And maybe I don't know, or I don't know, do I talk to the parent? Do I refer out? Like, how does that work? I mean, because I feel like at the high school level, like the high school kids, just as you know, you hope that they talk to you first, but many times the person that they're with 8 hours a day is not you, they're with other adults.
Right.
And so what does that generally look like?
There is a full-time counselor here, an LCPC.
Right, but what does that look like if you are, for instance, an adult in the building that's not a counselor that is wondering about a student or worried about a student? What does that look like?
You know, I think it depends on the case. Probably teachers would start with a guidance person. Depending on the relationship they have with the student, they may want to actually talk to the student themselves. Sometimes a teacher may even walk the student down. It's possible the teacher will contact the parents and say, just to let you know, we do have a full-time counselor here. So there's, again, multiple pathways that could happen.
And I guess the next question is how standardized is that, or how well is that understood or integrated into the work of all the teachers? That sort of ability to refer and willingness to refer.
Right. It happens plenty at the school I am at. I can certainly follow up about that.
My perspective has across the schools has been that teachers are extremely comfortable and willing to go to the counselor in the school and say, hey, I have a concern about this student, and the counselors are extremely good about following up with that student, and they are constantly seeing new students that have been brought to their attention. So yeah, I see it, pretty seamlessly.
I mean, I think it's sort of, I was kind of asking, do you wish it were easier, is kind of what I was about to ask. If it were easier to communicate between teachers and y'all, but it sounds like, you feel like the system's working.
The things that I've seen, it's pretty easy. The schools are so small, you know what I mean?
Oh, well,
That
sure.
there's so much good communication going on that it is great.
I just taking it from the, not from a high school perspective, but the past couple of years, even right from the cusp of COVID, there's a lot of things happening, especially in the smaller communities. So what do you do in a situation like there's definitely kind of a need? I think you kind of sort of addressed it for like a younger child with elementary school age that is just clearly having issues, but doesn't want to go talk to someone in the school because all their friends will know that they're weird. I mean, I've heard a couple of kids say that, they don't want to, and how do you
But there
work
are
through that?
risks and benefits to having school happen in counseling. We also have something called contractees. So those are basically folks mostly in private practice that come into our school. Usually the school is not paying for it. There are some situations where they are, the insurance or main care is being billed. So sometimes kiddos are more comfortable going to that person. But you're right, there are some risks and benefits. And again, that's part of my role is working with the family. Sometimes we find a really great fit but the appointment's in Ellsworth at 9 a.m. And then we're working with the staff to make sure the student is getting what they need.
I was just curious if that, is there a different kind of like pathway that you try to go
Definitely. And again, it's about knowing our students, and some situations are better served not in the school. We have to remember we're not a mental health agency. We certainly can provide mental health supports. And sometimes it's, like I said, it's better depending on the situation and what the family needs. Again, it's about knowing our students, knowing the situations, knowing our families. Would this make more sense to have this seen outside of school?
All right, one more. Can you, all of you, talk about briefly, if you can, how you've seen this? So the trauma of the last 3 years on these kids is a different kind of trauma, like the trauma of COVID. How are you seeing that playing out? What does that look like that's different from the other sorts of, I don't know if you call it regular old, regular stressors? I feel like it plays out differently in some kids or maybe in some families, but what have you seen from our population, how it has looked differently, and how are we responding to that in a different way?
I can speak briefly from the K-8 side, and some are positives and some are negatives. We've had some students that say, particularly when it started, we were all 6 feet apart, say, I like this better. People aren't crowding me. And right. And then on the side though, from the teenagers, they may feel more isolated. They may not have been able, again, it's family decisions. They may not have been able to gather as much as they wanted to. I think it depends on the students and grade level. There have been some positive parts that have come out of it, such as the increased outdoor time that we were really doing last year. But again, we are trying to, again, provide that structure and routine. And we know this has been tough on them. We know that. And it's March and we just had daylight savings time and just It's been rough. And then if we just show up and be there for our students every day, that's part of the healing process.
I think that, do you mind, yeah, I think that similar to across the country, you know, there's, as with all of us, there's an increase in anxiety, you know, kind of widely across the district. But the fact that we were primarily able to stay in person last year was huge. I mean, the benefits of being in such a small area and being able to, you know, having the like days at the high school or whatever it was, and you know, being able to really to spread out, that made a huge difference. And so and last Thursday, the smiles on the kids' faces, they were just so relieved to take off their masks. It was wonderful. Another thought that I had thinking about your question is that it's always at the back of our mind, the challenges of the past couple of years. I'm thinking about the statements that we put into our reports, that when we're comparing other kiddos to other kids their age, these are standardized assessments that are not normed during the pandemic.
Right.
And so we're having to take that into consideration when we're doing our assessments and really trying to think through and process, you know, is this a disability or is this just the way it is right now? And so we're really having to take that and think about that, and being mindful and thinking about how to put support to the team. Support them.
Yeah, what I would say, just to piggyback, I think some of the evaluations I've done, some of the kids that have been home longer, I should say, at home, not getting in-person learning, it's been harder for them to adjust coming back. I've seen that as a, you know, kind of a pattern in some of the buildings I'm in. We can't control any of that kind of thing, but we try to do the best we can with that.
It goes back to what Edie was saying about getting to know our students, and I think that's one of the best trauma-informed practices that we can put into place. And I think overwhelmingly across the schools, as I see teachers and staff doing a phenomenal job of getting to know their teachers and what they need. So yeah, they should be very proud about that.
And we're still learning about our caseload or the special ed numbers right now. We're trying to evaluate, see the families and see where they are at least for now, where they're at, and trying to make the positive difference, because I think everyone's working super hard.
Thank you.
If you have any other questions that you think of later, feel free to contact either one of us. I'm sure we'd be happy to answer your questions or have a chat or whatever. So feel free to give us a chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Next item is updates from subcommittees. Because we have a very full agenda, and with Susan being on, I'd like to defer. There's not a lot to report on middle school reorganization. I'd like to have something for the next meeting, but there's not a lot to report there. The anti-racism task force has been meeting. Those meetings sort of trying to look towards some goal setting for next year and how to align with our like how to be working together with the district a little bit more, so that the task force understands the AOS process, and so we can sort of be like, a lot is happening at the sort of district level on the anti-racism and equity front, and the task force members are anxious for a lot to happen. So figuring out how we can coordinate communication, and also how the people on the task force, because it's sort of, you know, as quite a bit of turnover of students graduating, can know about like our budget process and where is the right, where is the most effective point of advocacy for different things that people work on. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just trying to feel what progress looks like for them. You know, like it's such a big task, and how do they feel like they're accomplishing something? I mean, we're having a lot of really great conversations within the group, and I think they just want to like have something to go off of.
Right, and
so a little bit more interaction.
There's a balance, like there's some community building and personal learning that happens with like some studying and whatever, which is valuable, but then balancing that with improved learning and growth with the original sort of impetus, which was about moving the whole district forward and sort of, I mean, the district is moving forward regardless of what the task force does at this point because of that initial impetus, but just aligning those competing, or not competing with those two needs and desires. Yeah.
Sorry, I was late. I know the task force also, now that we have a new superintendent, wants to kind of work on bringing you in a little bit more too, right?
Right.
We didn't have a superintendent for a period of time there, or the sort of transitioning happened. So now that's part of the goal too, is to strengthen that communication relationship.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
And Kate Mussey set a meeting with me last week to sit and talk about the priorities and asked me some questions about the work that I've been doing. And so I thought that was really helpful for me and for her. She heard a little bit of things that I have done over the years and are continuing doing and bringing to the district. And, just talking about some of the priority for the task force, which was experts for training. That was something, restorative justice and training for student facilitators in terms of those processes, and looking at ways to assist teachers and work, teachers and principals and work in their schools. So I thought we had a really nice conversation. And I shared a book with her that I'll start reading that she didn't know of before. So I feel pretty good about that. It's called Street Data. And basically taking a look at other ways of organizing information about our schools and our students, especially through the lens of equity. So, I think that would be an interesting part of our work.
Okay. Any questions before we move on to our favorite topic, school calendar? So although this summer discussion, I think we, if appropriate, we would be thrilled to take action on this item. Right out the state, so that partly to enable the administrators to expedite their plan for the next year.
We took the thoughtful conversations that folks had the last time we met, and if you wouldn't, you guys were very much in support. One of the pieces was sort of thinking about the regularity and where some of those early releases were within the month. So we shifted those. Typically, they are now the third Friday. There were some comments about bumping them up to some of the holidays. So we made those shifts. The idea of, and then there were some pieces about understanding the start date. So we put an S in there. So we found a letter that would be supportive, not taken the wrong way. And so that is set in there as well. And, that idea of having some kind of sense of a hard stop, we're looking at 16th, and a recognition. I can't remember if it was in the last draft. The holiday for Juneteenth was not in the calendar at that time, and now it's in there as a national holiday, so that's in there. And then I've met multiple times with the superintendents, and actually all of our town looks like we're all starting on the same day. Ellsworth is the only one that's, she apologized for being a little behind the eight ball, as we had all ours ready to go. And so taking a look at making sure we were in sync with the HCTC calendar, and we have sort of some days that we can play there. And so right now we're looking like we're in line to support that. So I am supportive of this calendar, and I hope you are, and that Julie and Rhonda can then begin some in-depth planning on those, especially particularly around those district days.
An annoying question to ask. What are the changes? What are the major changes you've made between last document? Are there any?
just the S and moving the early release days to the third Thursday. There are some concern about that. Maybe, if they can be backed up to some of the holidays on the Fridays, that would be helpful.
Okay. And it looks like you did move a professional day to March. which
Oh,
is
yeah,
why I'd
I
asked
talked about
one
that
weekend
last
in
time.
March.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, looks good.
Any questions?
Can I move that we adopt this calendar for the 2022-2023 school year? Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh. Thank you, everybody. Work.
Put that on the website. Start planning.
Is that a record?
Yeah. So, we have some, first readings of policies, relating to admission of resident and non-resident students, which are linked in your agendas. Are there any questions about those policies or, Joanna, would you like to comment on those? Yeah.
Non-resident students. It's been a topic of discussion in our board, the extent to which our school has numbers of non-resident students. I think the last count I heard was 24. And for some people, that's a concern. And when we had that discussion, many of them are staff people, so that's one category. I didn't hear a lot of concern about that. But one of the areas that I heard concern was prior analysis and action by a superintendent to simply move a kid, that's whoever's request, from one school to another school, seemingly without not a lot of consultation with the receiving school. And maybe, for example, the example that was given was, well, if somebody says a kid is being bullied in one school, well, the perception was, whether it's accurate or not, was, well, then let's move into another school instead of maybe trying to focus some attention on the bullying in the school. So, and I don't, no specific cases were discussed and I'm not attempting to. But my sense was that out of that conversation came a desire to have, the superintendent has endless latitude in this regard, but that there would be some sort of procedure and expectations for how a case or a student's a request was analyzed and processed in a way that seemed best for the students, but also fair and reasonable to all of the various schools. So I throw that out as a question as it pertains to this. And it's not anything I mean, Mike was part of that discussion. So I don't think it's new, any of it's new to you. I'm not. So.
When you look at the law, Gail was right. The superintendent has pretty broad latitude in terms of doing that, and depending on, we talked about this when it was an item, depending on whatever the administration is at the state level, either superintendent agreements would be granted just by fiat because of a political interest in a school choice, or they're very difficult and you don't make them unless the compelling interest for the concern and safety of a student is at a level that requires movement to a different school. And Gail talked about sort of bullying, so oftentimes that happens. We are definitely in some small communities. As an assistant principal in a larger school, if there were some concerns, you had 3 homerooms to sort of play around with, and also shifting classes, and that's sometimes harder to do when you have those circumstances to try to figure that out. I think the idea, and I haven't seen one, and it's something I think is worth researching, a procedure that superintendents follow so that you don't find yourselves in situations where there may not have been notice to the administrator at a school or the counselor in that school to sort of talk through a process that might be thoughtful so that if a decision is made, you know that you have sort of gone through some steps to have conversation. I think that's fair to think about, and I can sort of research and look and see what's out there. I know we don't, we don't have one currently that I would look at and to be able to sort of look through that process.
If I could just speak to how this impacts the kids. My daughter, went to Tremont School through 7th grade. We actually had an agreement in place for April of 2020 to move her to Connors Emerson for the end of 7th grade and her 8th grade year. And then we ended up waiting until her 8th grade year because of the pandemic and school shutting down, and feeling like it wasn't fair to have her enter into an online only without knowing the teachers and that. But that process, it was really comforting to me to see how well it was handled at the time. I was not a school board member at the time. I was just a concerned parent. I met with Mark. I had met with our principal several times, our guidance counselor, everybody at Tremont School was on board that this was a better situation for my daughter to have her attend a bigger school and get into a different social group. Also, she was struggling in math, and this changed everything for her. She got into her 8th grade year. She had an entirely different, very supportive friend group after feeling like she wasn't supported at her school. She went from being a struggling math student to having a math teacher who was very supportive of her, and now math is probably her best subject in school right now. It really can make a big difference. These kids in our tiny little schools like Tremont, she was in a class of 15 that most of these kids have been together since they were like 4 in preschool. And like Mike was saying, there wasn't an option to switch kids up by homeroom to kind of deal with the social issues that she was dealing with. And ironically, one of the kids that she was having the most trouble with was one who had transferred into our school. So, that fluidity can be tricky for some people and helpful for others, but I do think it's something that we need to keep that process going. And on the receiving school end, it was vetted through Barb Neely as the principal. It was vetted through the guidance counselor there. So I felt like it was handled very well. And I'm so appreciative of it because it really did change her whole attitude towards school and set her up really well for high school.
Yeah.
Can I just say that I'm hearing that and thinking about it and from the perspective that I bring to it, this belongs in the reorganization agenda discussion.
Yeah.
Because that would directly have an impact on how we think about how we should best educate our kids.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And we still have to have a policy in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it's very relevant. It's very relevant.
It's also very relevant to the middle school conversation.
Well,
the
the
kids get
whole
all
thing.
that.
The whole thing. Not just
So,
middle school.
should we take those thoughts, because this is the first reading, then we'll bring this back within changes.
I have another very different comment. And I don't know if it really fits into this, but I was approached a couple of weeks ago, and I think I told you about this, Jessica, from someone from Blue Hill saying, why doesn't Blue Hill have the option of tuitioning kids into MDI anymore? And this gentleman was saying that he thought that there would be a pretty decent number of kids who might be interested in joining our high school from the Blue Hill area if there were a bus. That's what he told me, which I didn't remember that there had ever been Blue Hill.
That's
saying you remember that, Selena?
There were some, so,
Yeah.
I believe she might have been, that service. I'm wondering if they would.
Right. Well, I know we talked about when we were doing budgets that, revenue was down from tuition students. And so if there's a community that. Oh, yeah.
That's a fine point.
Right. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's just a thought.
With that,
Just for background information, they did Blue Hill and Surrey and I just did Blue Hill and Surrey about 5 years ago. When, said they would no longer send tuition students if we paid, if we were charging the debt surcharge. We no longer charge that because we don't have current debt. And George Stevens Academy is now charging a surcharge on top of their regular tuition. So I do think there could be some openings with Blue Hill. We want to explore that. And we did have a number of.
Yeah.
I mean, a number, not a huge number, but
Right.
you.
Yeah.
so we will, are there any final comments on that? Okay. So that brings us to our next, to our action item, which is second reading and consideration of the transgender and gender expansive students policy. And I think people may have heard my talk about this, but this is not merely for a revision to the policy that was brought before, but a total sort of redo, I would say, in consultation with Outmain and other experts to try to craft a policy that is a really supportive and excellent policy, and it's a really good policy.
So the policy committee, after my review with the folks from Outmain, and basically we took 2 different schools' policies as I had shared before, and sort of did the Arlo got the circle and arrow and paragraph on the back of each one, and sort of putting this should go here and that should go there, and then really good discussion about why, and crafted this. And then we sat down together as a policy committee, reviewed it again, and made some tweaks. And this is what we came up with. One of the biggest pieces that was lacking from the Drummond and Woodson version that folks looked at earlier was the idea of training and dissemination of information. I think that was important to individuals, not only on this board, but also folks that you have heard speak here, and made some adjustments to the language to be sensitive to people's ideas and thoughts. So I feel comfortable with what we drafted together.
So I think I'd like to move that we incorporate the proposed policy ACAAA, transgender and gender expansive students, into district policy.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Were there any revision? You sent it to Drummond Woodson after policy tweets, so was there anything came out of that?
No, that was good.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's fine. Okay, that brings us to any other business. But we're not done, actually, so. And future agenda item,
Jessica?
yeah.
Can we just have a clarification about what sort of response will occur as a result of public comment? And also, I just want to say that I have no idea what the conversation was prior to that, but sometimes it's a little bit cut and dry to have somebody give a public comment, especially one like that, and then we just move on. Or like last week, you explained to people the process is people give public comment, and then we don't actually interact with that. So I don't know if that person, I have no idea if that
She's
person-
come to policy committee a couple of times, so we're
Okay.
in an ongoing dialogue, so
Good,
she
okay.
knows our process.
Thank you.
I don't know if she's- She does know our process, I mean,
Good.
you're right, and that I would like to explain that, and maybe some of my, I forget, our process in the future to people, but I know in her particular case, she does know, because I have had, Mike and I both exchanged with her quite a bit. And on your other business, do you just want to add on to your, the comments you made about how you're reviewing the harassment policy in light of?
Yeah, and I think in part of the conversations that I had with the folks, from Out Main, and when you look at the end of this policy, it has policies that are related to it. The harassment policy is related to it. And so I think it's fair to be able to look at those to make sure that those policies are meeting the needs of all students. And as both of the individuals from Out Main who spoke with me, they were, very clear that, the harassment policy isn't just for transgender, for all kids, and to assure that there's a level of visibility, I think is something, that we could do. And, I'm planning on meeting with Matt and Ian and to sort of talk those pieces through and see where we are and, where are the best places and how do you make it more visible? And that has come out multiple times in people's responses. So I think those are fair things that we could do and take a look at. And in terms of myself meeting with the student who had concerns, to be able to share what their experience was. And are there some lessons that we can get from there? And I think it's fair to sort of speak with the high school, some things were said, whether or not they were truthful in terms of the types of discipline that happened here. I've seen discipline reports where kids aren't here because of certain behavior that occurs. So, I think that might be important information for the board to hear to sort of eliminate, where we are and trying to figure out, zero tolerance is an important idea in terms of looking at restorative justice. And when those were in place, if you were to talk to folks in the LGBT community, oftentimes those types of policies were used to hurt them and to keep them out of school based on experiences that they were having. And, you might hear a different perspective from Out Main when talking about what types of discipline are most appropriate for dealing with harassment in schools.
Hopefully we will have more on this in the future. Agenda item.
Yes, so I might be jumping ahead to future agenda items here, but probably, I guess, 2 months ago now, there was a discussion about changing the agenda to include a public comment at the end of it, and I have not seen that yet. So just
Yes, we need to be sure. I did have a second public comment at the last meeting, and I was prepared to offer the opportunity for public comment here. I mean, that is the intention, but I'll talk with Selena and make sure that I remember to get it on the actual agenda. Thank you. Gary?
Can I just ask for a quick update on how the optional masking went and where we are with our pool testing numbers? Are we seeing any change in that?
I haven't seen any. I mean, I think I have a couple of individuals that I've heard about, and of course I sent them the encouraging pool testing. My hope was that I would make some kind of cognitive connection between permit and pool testing with the comment at the end. Who knows? We'll see. I haven't heard any, big numbers. It's an isolated here or there. We would hope to see more join. I think we'll see this week. Most people, I watched and talked to some kids that were coming into the high school who were parents of staff, and just like staff, walking into a building with your mask off was kind of odd. Some kids said that they were going to wait and see how they felt, and if they chose to take their mask off, they were going to see if their teacher was wearing it. If their teacher was, they were going to put theirs on. For just being respectful of that. And so I think you saw sort of a variety of approaches. I think little kids were gleeful. That seems to be the comment that I heard in the elementary school principals and folks that I talked to. So that was 3 days, and we'll see how this week goes. When I was at Mount Desert, it was a mix of adults and kids. And there were more middle school kids wearing. When I was up in the middle school, I was in an 8th grade, I was in a 5th and 6th grade classroom, and I went downstairs and I was kindergarten and some 3rd and 4th graders, and there were fewer masked the lower grades and more masked at the perspective. And to be common amongst schools.
Great. And I had parent-teacher conferences with all 4 of Aaron's teachers on Thursday. So the day that it all changed, and it sounds like about 50% of the kids across the board. Some classes had more and some had fewer, but we haven't had any incidents with anybody giving anybody a hard time either way, I hope.
Not that I've been made aware of, and I'm sure principals have been dealing with them effectively, in their schools, but nothing's come to me.
Great, thanks.
So, future agenda items, we will certainly, have our usual reports and updates. We'll have a second reading of these policies that we've had first readings of. And more items will reveal themselves.
And we'll have an operations from Eric to talk about, where he is with the busing software. Hopefully have done some runs in terms of, what that looks like. That was his plan, so.
Is there any second public comment? Public comment? Yes, go ahead.
You know my name and residence?
Yeah.
Sure. Hi, my name is Mia Callahan. I teach at Trenton and I live in Northeast Harbor. I just wanted to say that as a gender expansive educator, it really means so much to me that the board has considered and adopted a policy that's explicit about how to honor the transition of a student who comes to you and, hi, it's Thursday morning. By the way, here's a significant life update for me, which is a new experience for me. And also, I think, going to be a more common experience as we move forward, and listening to, nationwide, the conversation around how different states are deciding to legislate their reactions to transgender and transgender non-conforming students. It's been really disheartening listening to the national dialogue, and it's been so important for me to hear all of you talk about to put explicit supports in place for these students. And it really means a lot, and I really appreciate that we've put into solid words how we're going to support these students and how we're going to make sure that they know that they are welcome and valued members of our community. Because so many people in so many other places in the country are going to great lengths to make sure that students do not feel that way. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Okay. So we will now, we have 2 executive sessions, and then we're going to come out and we have one more action item after that before our adjournment. So I would take a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 405-6E contract negotiations.
Second.
Any discussion?